folks, I'm going to kind of share my thoughts with you on the whole Jon Jones brouhaha we got going on in the UFC. Now, I've had to wait a couple of days to really put my thoughts together on this one because, when I initially thought about it, I'm like, well, here we go, just more typical Jon Jones behavior, a guy who has all the money in the world and absolutely none of the common sense. But, it's really kind of getting down to it. I think this kind of speaks to a much larger issue about the world of mixed martial arts, but we'll get to that in just a bit. But first, just my general observations on this whole title stripping debacle. If you're asking me whether or not I believe Jon Jones rightfully deserved to be stripped of the title and indefinitely suspended, I'm not really entirely sure. I mean, if you're involved with a hit and run, let alone one involving a pregnant woman, and you're in a rental car and you flee the scene, and they find a weed pipe in your car and all the information has your name on it, I mean, that's pretty dumb. I mean, there are lots of things you can do to get in trouble, but to do something and leave that much evidence behind to make it that easy to prosecute, I mean, that alone is probably worth getting suspended for a while. Now, I'm really not going to be one of those guys who has a hammer on the morality, because doing something like this, which I'm hoping he did unintentionally, recklessly as he may have been, don't think it's something as bad as, what Ray Rice did to his wife, or even what Adrian Peterson's doing to his kids. As a general rule, I would say probably not. Does he deserve to be stripped of the title? Well, you know what? If you're going to get stripped of the title for failing a drug test, which is cheating, but this is on moral grounds, I don't know. To me, it kind of rings the same philosophy. You're a champion, but you're also a spokesperson for the company. And I think, especially with Jon Jones, he's in a situation where he is literally the face of the sport. You ask anybody with any sort of gumption, any superficial knowledge of the world of mixed martial arts, they'll come out and say this guy's probably the pound-for-pound best fighter on the planet. So for lack of a better term, he is the face of the company. He's the face of the sport. This is pretty much the equivalent of, LeBron James getting arrested for buying a hooker. Or it's the equivalent of Tom Brady getting arrested for running a meth ring. It's the kind of thing where you don't really want your marquee guy, the person who epitomizes what you're about, the guy who's supposed to sell t-shirts and pay-per-views, and be that person who's on kids' posters. When you got behavior like this going on, just from a business stance, outside of the whole morality argument, just out of your own economic sustainability, you got to make the call. And we've seen this stuff happen like this before, and but it's never really been with a character this high profile. Obviously, you did have champions suspended. Tim Sylvia was one of them. Anderson Silva, well, he wasn't necessarily suspended because of the drug. He wasn't a champion at the time, rather. This has happened. We saw it with Sean Shirk. It goes on all the time. But this one is different. Like I said earlier, it's because, you got to put in the marketing, the advertising angle. When you're put in that position where you are literally the number one guy on the planet, you come around and do this stuff, it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to get hit with a hammer. You're probably going to get hit a little bit harder than would perhaps say a mid-carder. If this happened to Ryan Bader, well, he'd get fired. He wouldn't be definitely suspended, he'd be gone. But for this one, when you're in such a strategically important position for the company, you got to do something. And I think he probably did a whole lot worse stuff than what we know about, and that's probably why he was preemptively suspended or put on leave. This is the way it always is. I'm sure Dana White and Fertitas had a long discussion with him where he talked about God knows what else he's doing, and they said, before this stuff gets out and publicized, let's just kind of take the belt off of you, give you some time to cool off, let you get right with the Lord, and we'll see what we can do a year from now. Now, as far as how long he's going to be out, I don't know. A year seems a little bit too long because really there are no marquee names left in the light heavyweight division. I think he's probably going to be out probably until fall at the earliest. I mean, they're going to make him go in for a while, but you got to give him time to clean up his act and at least try to put the best foot forward. Now, moving beyond that, here's the thing. I do not think this is really anything even remotely close to being an isolated incident. This is not an aberration in the world of mixed martial arts. When you look at a guy like Jon Jones, and for years I've been saying this guy, he's going to be like Mike Tyson. He's just going to be so dominant in this sport. He's going to be out there just absolutely just devastating people, outclassing dudes, fighting from a different planet. And apparently Jon Jones really took that to heart, because he's not just set on being like Mike Tyson in his prime athletically, but also like Mike Tyson in his prime crime and degeneracy-wise. And here's the thing, you know, if you're a 27-year-old kid, 28-year-old kid, however old Jon Jones is, you got all this money, you're going to make bad decisions. Now, the thing is, as a fighter, this dude gets paid to get hit in the head for a living. That is his bread and butter, is to cause violence. And, you know, you look at fighters, you know, this is not the first time that a fighter in the UFC has went on to do something really stupid. You look at a guy like Chris Lieben, who's been arrested for DUI a couple of times. You look at the ultimate example, John Koppenhaver, War Machine. The guy who legally changed his name to War Machine nearly beat his girlfriend to death, then tweeted out to his police to go find him. There may have been two different incidents, but regardless, he did all those things simultaneously. You know, you look at, you know, just what's going on, not just in Ultimate Fighting, but you look at the world of boxing, where guys have all these traumatic brain injuries. You know, you have guys who are just really fighting in their prime one day, and 5 years later, they're dead. And I think ultimately, more than anything, this is a consequence, at least in part, of sort of the physicality of the sport. And now I'm not saying that, you know, we should tone it down, or we should put gloves on guys, or make them wear helmets. But the fact of the matter is, when you go into Ultimate Fighting, it's an inherently dangerous job. I mean, this is something where you go in and you get choked out and you get kicked in the head, and people try to break your bones for a living. I mean, you really can't be a normal person and compete in Ultimate Fighting. You can't be a professional fighter and not have some really unnormal perspectives on the world. You got to have different thought processes. And there is a wealth of literature out there that kind of tells us, you know what, you know, even going back to the 1920s, you see studies on boxers being punch drunk and the long-term damage that causes. I mean, it's all been avoidable. These guys, they're out there, and for our pay-per-view dollars, are just doing long-term, probably terminal damage to themselves. I mean, you see it with all these NFL guys who are dropping dead at 40 and 50, and it's only a matter of time. I mean, the MMA is still a fairly young sport, so we really haven't had that large of a sample pool to kind of see what the long-term longitudinal effects of fighting are. But, you know, I think a good 10, 15 years down the line, we're going to be seeing all the marquee guys now. Kind of the same situation you're seeing guys like Junior Seau, where they do have, like, this long-term internal cranial injuries, or at least somewhat retarded development because of being hit in the head so many times, or being choked out, or whatever have you, happens in the octagon. And, you know, I think before we kind of come out, we cast stones a guy like Jon Jones. Obviously, there is something called conscious decision-making, and all the stuff he's been doing, the drunk driving, the cocaine, the hit and run, fling all that stuff. Obviously, yeah, that's his own decision. The only person to blame for himself is that. But I think when you look at everything on the holistic level, because remember, these guys, Jon Jones, yeah, he's making a lot of money. He's got he did have the Reebok and Nike money. Some of these guys have sponsorships. But, you know, the average UFC fighter is making, you know, pretty much peanuts to compete. And, you know, there are guys who are going to be curb jerked on the next pay-per-view who are making $10,000 for showing up to fight. And here's the sad thing, is that doesn't all go to them. I mean, that's split among their campers, their trainers, you know, their entourage. So, you know, I think easily, you know, if you're a UFC fighter and you're opening up on a show, I mean, you might be taking home, maybe if you're lucky, triple digits from a main card pay-per-view match. And that's just sort of an inherent part of the sport. You're not getting paid a lot for the physicality that you're going through. And of course, we all know these guys aren't afforded health insurance in the UFC. They have private plans, if any. So you're looking at all this stuff. It's a perfect storm. You have young guys, and your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. That's part of your brain that's responsible for reason and judgment and decision making. You know, that's not fully formed until you're 25. So if you're starting out in MMA at 17, 18, 20, and there are a lot of really young guys in the UFC, guys like Rory McDonald picks up for a title shot shortly. I mean, he's really young. He's in his early 20s. You know, all these guys, you're going through this very important neurological developmental point. But what are you doing? I mean, you're training, you're getting punched, you're getting choked out, you're being made unconscious, you're having all these brain-rattling injuries. I think, you know, it's pretty much unavoidable. That's going to cause some irreversible damage to you. It's going to alter the way you think. That's going to alter the judgment you make, and it's going to alter ultimately the person you end up becoming. So, you know, like I was saying earlier, I don't think it's a 100% the physicality of the sport, which is the reason why Jon Jones did things he did, but I think it's also kind of just as ignorant to kind of say that it's not playing a role, because it is. We don't really have the dearth of literature out there on it because, once again, MMA is a fledgling sport, but I think over the years we start seeing the research on this. Kind of going parallel to what we're seeing in football and boxing, we come to realize, hey, you know, these guys, they're literally sacrificing not only their brains, but their bodies, their livelihoods for this short-term fame and popularity. And it's very tragic. But you know what? It's kind of hypocritical of me to say anything, because you know what? I'm a fan. I'm supporting these guys. I watch the pay-per-views. I pay the cover charge. I do the MMA write-ups. I'm doing these videos. I have an investment in the sport. And you know what? As long as we have that, and these guys are willing to make that sacrifice, you know, what can I say? I mean, you're going to have stuff like Jon Jones doing the stuff he does. This is a fair trade-off for the industry. And, you know, before we point any fingers at Jon Jones on stuff he's been doing and call him an animal or a thug or a degenerate or any of that fun stuff, you know what? We got to look at the mirror. We're the reason why he's doing it. We're paying his bills. We're wanting to see him fight. We're the guys keeping him in a living. If anything, it's our fault first and foremost.